Greetings and welcome to the Warhammer 40,000 kill team video where today I'm going over the tier list. But before we get into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. What did you think of it and did you find it useful? And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out in the episode description for free down below. An affiliate link at Element Games, an affiliate link at Crossfire Games with a discount code, as well as a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But let's get on with the video. So yeah, you know what? I did 34 faction videos. It's going to be 35 soon, maybe. And I was like, fine, you know what? Everyone was asking for it. I was going to wait for the FAQ. Like, there is an FAQ coming, but I actually then realized probably nothing much is going to change too heavily because the World Championships of Warhammer is coming up soon. So we're probably not going to get any big balance changes, except for maybe like clarifying equipment, so that won't really change much unless I do a tier list for equipment. But remember, the tier list is for fun. It's for fun, a useful tool if you're trying to think like what teams you want to play, what teams you want to watch out for, you know, that kind of stuff. Because remember, S tier are factions that are likely to win all their games, like at a 4-round tournament, very likely to win an event. A tier teams are teams that are very likely to go 3 wins, 1 loss, could win as well. B tier teams can go 3-1, but are more likely to go like 2-2. But it's harder for them to win an event. They have more bad matchups compared to the A and S tier, where A has some bad matchups and S tier has very little. Then you've got C tier, which is like middle of the road, very likely to go 2-2, or maybe like 1 win and 3 losses. And then you've got D tier, where you're very likely to go 1 win and 3 losses, or 4 losses. So generally not great competitively. But remember, just for fun, it's to, you know, help for you to prepare. If you're going to play a weaker faction, you need to realize you're going to have to prep more. I remember, if you're like a faction loyalist of, I don't know, 3 weeks, you may you may do better than someone who's just hopped onto your faction for a new game. For you know what I mean, for the new edition. But yeah, let's get on with it. Those are the tiers clarified, so let's get on with this funky tier list. I should have an article version in the episode description below. If not, I was too tired. So let's get on with it. So starting off with G tier. Now remember, the tiers aren't in order of strongest to weakest. They're just in whatever order I could allocate them with. So starting in D tier with Blades of Cain. They are maybe the worst kill team in the game. While your Die Avengers are better, they're limited by what tac ops they can select based on the popular aspect warriors they can take. And effectively, while Die Avengers got buffed, their aspect warriors don't really reflect how they play, and they just get dunked on by elites and actually most operatives in the game. While you are an 8 operative kill team with 3 APL, Striking Scorpions need to have a 3-up armor save, but they don't. They should have 5 attacks, but they don't. And your Howling Banshees, while they have 4 attack power weapons, aren't really that useful. So it's just really, really weird. Hopefully when we get the first balance data slate, they get revitalized a bit. Otherwise, they're just not in a great spot. Then you've got Chaos Cult. They are a 14 operative kill team, a very expensive kill team to get. And their biggest drawback is they are way too honest in terms of they were nerfed in ways that made sense. But then, for example, they only allowed 1 torment to generate per turning point, but then the torment didn't get buffed. It's still 13 wounds with a worse regeneration. It should be 16 wounds if you want to cap it at 1 per turning point. Otherwise, it's just kind of weird. You know, it's very hard for them to like keep these torments safe and then just like wait. Because then the problem is by turning point 3, you have 2 torments. You want to, you need 3 torments to push up. So it's really bad. Like, in my opinion, you either just remove the restriction on torments, so you can have like 2 torments turning point 2, or you just make torments better. Otherwise, this team needs some help. Then you got Pathfinders. Pathfinders aren't great. There are meme builds with them. I will have to admit, annoyingly, Shazla spam will kind of work. And they oddly have some game into elite kill teams, but they cannot beat other horde teams. And they oddly are now, despite the main shooting kill team, can't beat other shooting teams in the shooting matchup. So, I mean, Pathfinders, I think the only thing you really need to do to Pathfinders is let targeting optics and high intensity marker lights work twice per turning point. And I think it's pretty much fine. Like, it just gives them some more utility, but those are D tier. They're definitely the weakest teams in the game. Then starting off with C tier, we have Deathcore of Krieg. They're okay. Like, they're still very solid. You know, there's ways to punish people. Like, an interesting thing I like to do is run 13 operatives. So you run 3 additional troopers, and then you make one of either your strategy ploys or firefight ploys free. They're still quite useful. I mean, it's really weird Bionic Arm Man isn't 4 attacks. That would be so cool. But otherwise, I think the team is in a solid spot. Really balanced. Exaction Squad are in a very weird spot. They just get dunked on by elites. The funniest thing, I still love how once per turning point they can use their piercing rounds, but only against like effectively Space Marines. It's just the image of them just going like, "Sir, there's a guardsman in the open. Do we use the shredding rounds? No, not today. No." It's just like, that would not be fair. You know, we play by the rules. The nice thing is, like, they can shoot into control range from unlimited ranges, but they have some nice niche tricks. But the fact they lost the big anti-reroll bubbles hurts them a lot. Although Subductors are still really nice. Galloppox Infected, I keep thinking, every time I think there's a way to play them, I realize they have more flaws. The only other way to run them is, like, technically Curse Mites don't have the group activation rule. So currently you could run 4 Curse Mites to get 4 activations, which isn't intentional. It's weird they're an 11 operative kill team for the kill op, even if you take your Mutoid Vermin. But the biggest problem is Drawn to the Hum should have stayed as the free dash, because your Nightmare Hulk's going down to 5-inch move, but then going up to 20 wounds with effectively non-existent damage negation makes them really hard to use. So they oddly die better. They die faster in melee than they do in shooting. It's a very weird kill team, and you have a control aspect, but they still kind of get dunked on by Marines. And actually most teams, I think, they can have a slow stalematey game, but it's going to be tight and not easy to play, especially on Gallodark. You know, Beta Decima's already rough for them, but Gallodark is really hard for Galloppox because of all the large open rooms in most maps, which basically means it's just walking death as these Nightmare Hulks try to move up the board. Then you've got Hunterclade. As I posted in the comments of my video, I did get it messed up. I didn't realize your gunners and assassins are capped. So you're capped between a mixture of 6 operatives that could either be 4 assassins and 2 gunners, excluding your leader. So if you wanted 5 assassins, you could take assassin leader, 4 assassins and 2 gunners. They just need to remove that rule, and for their imperatives, make the downside not active the first time they activate, and the kill team is great. They're just in a really weird spot where they're very restricted, but otherwise Hunterclade are a nice flex team. You're just still learning how to use Rust Stalkers without optimized gate, so you now have to climb and move around properly. Imperial Navy Breaches, you know, they still have brace for counterattack. They're a little bit more honest. They're the only kill team box that you can't build from a single box, which is hilarious. But they're still quite hard to play, and while they do really well on Gallodark, I'm not a fan of how they work on Vulcus and on Beta Decima. Beta Decima is just an effective loss. And Gallodark is really good for them, obviously, because they're designed for it. Problem with Vulcus is, you know, you have places to stage, but they struggle pushing up. And they only really have 2 ranged operatives, like long range. And now your rotor cannon just has rending and punishing, makes it not great. Then you've got Kazakin. Originally, I put them in B tier, but I think they're fine in C tier for now, just because they're not too great at hunting elites, but I think they probably should be in B. It's just they're okay. They're like, I need to play with them more, but I think they're safe. They're probably the best team in C tier. Really well-rounded, more fun to play, still very good. I think we're going to have to see other teams change to see how they rise. They do miss losing the Focadias, just making a guardsman stick around forever, but they're better in another kill team. Then you got Vespid. I think Vespid might be B tier, but at the moment I feel like they're just C. The main issue I find with Vespid is because they're all 2 APL and have no way to get a 3rd APL, they actually struggle playing the crit op, and there are a lot of missions where you kind of just go like, okay, I might get just 1 point a turn from the crit op at best. And, you know, you just ignore it and just go for killing. And then they are in this weird scenario where if you roll hot, they're amazing. Like if you roll a crit and 2 or 3 hits every time you shoot, obviously you're going to have a great time. If you're just rolling normal hits and you're not rolling any crits, you're not triggering any of their abilities. And while they do all have fly, they are quite restrictive. Like they have confirm kill, which is nice. It's just going to, like, the biggest thing is there are teams that completely ignore their ability of generating piercing on all their weapons. But they're a really tricksy and fun team, and with a lot of mobility tricks. But I think Vespid, if they don't improve based on like stats and stuff, they probably need to go up to 10 Vespid and the oversight drone, because only having 9 operatives that can do stuff along with like playing the mission makes it quite hard, especially considering most of their tac ops kind of rely on mission actions. Then for B tier, we start off with Elucidity and Starstriders. They were A tier last edition. I think they're B tier at the moment. It's harder for them to abuse their, assets, which is good for everyone else. And while Elucia Vane is better, she weirdly doesn't work, like her digilasers don't work with her reroll because the timing is off, which doesn't seem intentional, but that's how it works. But the problem is, while Elucia Vane is better, your Voidmaster and Assassin is a lot worse, and those were some of your big key pieces to do damage, but also stall out the opponent as your rest of your force moved up. And they haven't really gained anything from that. They do have more better warrants of trade, as well as like 2 more different airstrikes, and they have some equipment tricks. They're good. They're just, I think, solid B tier. May go up or down, but obviously Elites were already a hard matchup for them, and now it's even harder. Then you've got Farstalker Kimban, which I think people have been kind of sleeping on. Their main trick with them is Poach. So Poach lets them do a mission action on an objective as if you controlled it, even if your opponent has like 20 operatives on it. As long as you can get within it or not on control range, you can do that, and it basically makes you auto win missions like loot as well as sabotage, especially sabotage, where you could reliably score 6 points on the primary and your opponent can only score 0. And I think the way Farstalker Kimban are going to play is, once again, not as a killy focused to kill team, but aiming to max gather surveillance as well as the crit op, which they can do quite reliably. And I think they're more durable because they have better synergies, because they can, once they start getting kills, they start blowing up in terms of efficiency. And I think a lot of people are going to lose to Farstalker Kimban players maximizing on the tac ops and crit ops, which is good. Then you've got Hyrotech Circle. These might be A tier, but it's a really weird team. They've gotten worse and better, and I need to see more games with them, but I think they're generally B tier. The weird thing is your Nanomine has unlimited range and is a 12-inch bubble, which currently is ridiculous. But the kill team has a lot of tricks, and the Technomancer is quite viable now with its healing and buffing. And, death marks are really good as well, especially as you can spend a CP to put one on guard every turning point, which is very useful. So the team is way more controlled, slowed down, it can't move up fast, but it can play that reliably well. And with all its access to piercing or multiple dice weaponry, they actually do a decent chunk into elites. And I think a lot of people are going to get confused by them, especially as, even though they are a little bit weaker, they still have more ways to survive. Like, you're always going to take at least D3 damage every time you charge someone. They will resurrect more people, and you don't have easy ways to kill their bugs unless you get into close combat. Hand of the Archon remain in B tier for me. I know people kind of go like, losing Fleet of Foot wasn't that huge, but for me it really was. The thing is, pain tokens are a lot better because you now get them when you injure operatives, even if you don't kill them. So you can get, even if you get a bad roll, it's not too bad. They're quite good into elites. And, because they take the Dark Lance and the Blaster, so they have really good access to piercing 2 weaponry. But I don't know, I still find them a very tempo-based kill team. Even though they have more reliable access to pain tokens, they're not bad. They're just pretty good. They're oddly great Marine Hunters, but I think they're a bit worse into wider teams, although you're not going to see as much in my opinion. The nice thing is they can take Seek and Destroy, so they can really maximize champion, especially if you win initiative, which is very nice. As a Dark Lance is basically going to kill a Marine if it hits, and they still have like lots of tricks to force through crits and stuff. They're very flexible, but I still think they're B tier because they effectively require killing to get going, even though pain tokens are a lot easier to get. Next in B tier, we have the Hearthkin Salvagers. So they were A tier, maybe S tier last at the end of 2nd edition, but at the moment I think they're solid B. An interesting trick with this kill team is with proximate firepower and with grudge tokens, your crack grenades hit on freeze and have ways to proc crits reliably. So they have a lot of short-range firepower, but they still suffer more because their long-range firepower has been hurt quite considerably. The railgun is harder to use, and your las volley is okay, like the high las rotary cannon, but it's just not. I really miss that. It lost it doesn't have obscurity anymore. They're a great control kill team. You know, they will win a shooting matchup. You can't outshoot them. The problem they have now is they get rushed down very easily and they're very vulnerable to close combat, which, as it should be, they still have lots of tricks with like the locator, the dozer, so they're not completely defenseless in melee, especially if you take the harm assist, but I think they're solid in beta. The biggest thing they're going to have to struggle with is as games get more slower and only really start picking up turning point 3, when you only have 2 or even just 3 grudge tokens going into turning point 3, you're going to get blown up quite quickly, which is why I've just left them in B tier. Then you got Mandrakes. They were A before, but I think they're in B due to how the meta is at the moment. The Horde teams they were good against got a little bit better, while they also are now terrified of elites. They still have all the tricks they have to play around with. They're a little bit better to play with, and they do really like Vocus. And, you know, Gallowdark isn't too bad. Well, Gallowdark is great for them, as well as Beta Decima. So they're still very, very useful. The problem is they're this weird toolbox team. They need to get a kill with the Disciple of the Choose of the Flesh, and if the Choose of the Flesh doesn't get kills, you don't really get enough tempo to push forward. So it's still a quite kill-based team, but in a control way. You have to like kind of force your opponent to get into positions they don't want to be, then punish them. But you know, they're B for me. Then we've got Scout Squad. I know a lot of people wanted to put them last. I think they have a lot of play. Their forward scoutings are a lot better, more usable. They're not just locked into turning point 1. They're more useful and powerful, and I think the more people get out, like learn to use them better, the more this kill team is going to do well. Your knives are now 4-5 instead of 4-6 if you take a piece of equipment, which is still really useful, and you still have the backflip dude going to lethal free up 5-5 damage, which is very, very nice. It's nice that your sergeant automatically can shoot and fight twice, so you may want to give him the Astarte shotgun or the chainsaw that just automatically, but they're very tricksy, and I think the way they trigger their ceaseless, going into relentless abilities, is very, very good. They might go up to +1 operative, which will probably push them over the edge. But I think scouts do really well at like a defensive control game and then quickly rushing up, punishing the opponent, either with shotgun scouts or knife scouts, and you have a really nice permanent sniper. And then finally in B tier, I've put the Tempestus Aquilans. I know it hasn't really reflected in the battle reports, but I think Tempestus Aquilans are like the perfect noob stomp team, is in like they're great for new players, because if your opponent pushes up turning point 1 and 2, you'll blow them off the board and then push on with the tempo to win the rest of the game. But the problem is when you're playing at more higher level play and experienced opponents, they're not going to engage with you until turning point 3, when most of your abilities have turned off. So you're going to have to learn how to play around that. And unfortunately, because all your tac ops are based on like killing effectively or trying to move into the opponent's territory, that doesn't really synergize with this team, dropping a hat down and hoping for the best instead of like, especially going into turning point 3 where you need to get into position. They're still very, very solid. Like, you know, you go Melter, Plasma, and then like the gun drone. It's useful, but I think being in B is fine. They might go up or down. I don't think they really need to change them in a nice spot. It's just kind of weird because if you make their forward deploy mechanic like work into turning point 3 or tweak it to buff it a bit, they become even more toxic to play, you know, because that denial means you just can't push up and then you just wait. So you're going to end up getting quite bored at the higher end of play for Tempestus Aquilin players, in my opinion. Going into A tier, we start off with Brood Brothers. They were probably the best kill team last edition, near the end of it. They're a lot fairer now. All their leaders are -1 to hit, which means they're more manageable. The fact the Patriarch's still 21 wounds, can use the mind control if it fails next turning point, but the biggest problem is that it hits on freeze, and with a lot of ways to modify it to make it hit on forwards, even though it kept relentless, which is great, the team struggles a lot with the Patriarch, whereas the Primus is still really, really good, as well as the Magus. And your 2 Psychic Familiars are very useful, considering they can also draw angles for your shooting ploy. Otherwise, the kill team still remains heavily shooting focused and can fold quite easily in close combat. You're relying on your icon ward, setting up webs for you to punish your opponent. But I think how the meta's changed, they're a lot weaker despite being so good. Then we have Blooded. Blooded are very, very good. The good thing about Blooded is their strategy ploys got a lot better, so they weren't just saving command points for the CP reroll. And they have the most relentless ever in any kill team. They have a permanent sniper. They probably have too many ways to get relentless. And I think that's why they've restricted by like how many special weapons they can take, which is fine. Although I do struggle now to think when you would go, 2 additional guardsmen and then either the Ogre or the Enforcer. But the Enforcer is great. The Ogre is really good. You've got more utility. Everyone's great. And now you can take Infiltration instead of Seek and Destroy, it depending on your games, which is really nice. Being able to flex around is great. And I think they're a really powerful kill team, either ensuring hits or proccing Relentless quite reliably. The biggest thing a Blooded player is going to have to adapt to is now running out of command points, because you're going to spend them all mostly on your strategy ploys, which is good. Then in A tier, we've got Corsair Void Guard. In my opinion, they're the best Eldari team. They're insane. The fact the Shade Runner can teleport on Gallowdark doesn't feel fair, especially when you do a slicing attack, then throw a frag grenade. They have lots and lots of tricks. They are one of the best elite killers in the game right now. Super mobile. And the biggest thing is they now get balanced against enemy operatives on objectives or within control range of mission markers, which basically, when you combine it with stuff like confirm kill, all of a sudden you're now like proccing balanced everywhere, which is really good. You have an interruption mechanic. You can now take a heavy gunner and gunner. Corsair Void Guard are living at large, except for some of the teams above, keeping them down. And they do now, with buffed Warding Shield basically becoming like an old just to scratch, they have a great chance into elite kill teams. Then we have Felgor Ravager. This is another perplexing team because they got buffed, even though they were overperforming. I think the biggest change, if they wanted to balance Felgor, is make you so you can't frenzy if you're expended. So you can only frenzy if you have a readied operative. Otherwise, they're still really good. Like the Cygor, like the Cyborg War Beastman, and then the Mangler Squig still being 11 doesn't feel right. That could go down to 10. But the kill team is still really great. They got buffed way too much. Like their Savage Assault, when they switch from Conceal to Engage, now lets them change a miss into a hit instead of just a normal into a crit. So they're really, really good. I don't know why Felgor got buffed. The only thing keeping Felgor in check are elite kill teams. So if you nerf elite kill teams and don't address Felgor, Felgor is going to quickly rise to the top of the meta. But as I said, my conspiracy is that Games Workshop is full of goats, and this is part of the goat conspiracy, the goat Illuminati. Next in A tier, we've got the Harnkin Jaegers, the newest League of Votann kill team. What I really like about this kill team is being all the operatives being able to reposition 4 inches at the start of the turn, start of the game, and your mines are a lot, they're better because they're now jam units that move into them, and like their damage negation is really useful. The main thing about this kill team is that they're still incredibly command point intensive, although this is one of the few kill teams where turning point 1, you may go with the scouting option to give you free super conceal for the turning point, which would make sense. But they actually, if you're an elite hunter kill team that isn't elites, they mess them up quite a bit. And then a bad rolling elite kill team is probably going to struggle into Jaegers. So it's a very interesting balance. And I think Jaegers have more flexibility, either having operatives that, free operatives that can go to free APL, flexing around that. Very, very nice tricks and very, very useful. Even though their sniper is a bit static, it still has a mobile profile, which is nice. And it's just learning how to use the mines effectively, as well as the other operatives. Then you've got Commandos. I think they're definitely A tier. They are one of the few teams with 6 dice weapons, and they actually have 2 with the Rocket Boy and Bomb Squig. Interestingly, with the Bomb Squig, that has changed. So it starts on Conceal, but the first time you activate it has to switch to Engage and stay on. Commandos are definitely more a ranged keep away team. I think the best way to play Commandos at the moment is going for maxing gather surveillance, focusing on the crit op, and not really caring about the kill op, just making to tie your opponent and stay away from them and win other ways. So, if you're a very aggressive Commando player, unless you're investing in a lot of boys, you're not going to like how they play, but they do really control really, really well. And I've seen it go into quite great effect, especially on Vocus, because what you can do is pick the drop zone, which doesn't have the super vantage point in it, hookshot your grot to it into enemy territory, and then just start maxing gather surveillance every turn, and not being chargeable. So they have a lot of play. You're like, if you're wanting a bit of a flex into melee and range, you're running more harpoons, which is really good. But I think Commando's in a great spot. They're very balanced and have a really niche control playstyle, which I think is quite fun. Then you've got Novitiates. Now, people may be shocked they're an A tier, but you have to remember, Novitiates now have effectively unlimited acts of faith, and their damage negation is old damage negation. So instead of working once per turning point for each operative, it works every action for every operative that's applicable, which is kind of crazy. The fact they have unlimited, faith points is kind of going like, okay, that doesn't seem intentional. And then the other problem is like the Eviscerator technically being able to fight 4 times, but I think Games Workshop has just exploded with wording. But Novitiates are really good at forcing through crits and hits, making them more reliable. Their Flamers lost Dagger Dash, but you can dash in the strategy phase, then move and burn. They're very, very useful. They did lose a second source of APL to instead get +1 to their movement and then the ability to fight twice for free. Well, the first time normally, the second time for free, which was really nice. And I think Novitiates are quite good. On Gallowdark, they're quite scary, and I think especially if they get the right positioning and jump on elite players, they have a good chance of beating them. The main problem is actually the models because they don't look that great, but they're a really solid kill team. Then you've got our first elite team, the Phobos Strike team. They are definitely the weakest of the elite teams because they're only 12 wounds with a 7-inch move. They're a lot more honest. They're focusing definitely more on bolt guns, but then can flex from range to close combat, which is nice. I think you're always taking the comms to help facilitate this. If you're taking mixed teams, because you could have like 3 ranged infiltrators, then switching into like the Reavers during the turning point who will go melee to get lethal 5 up, which is on 5 attacks at +1 attack, which is very, very good. They're way more honest and I think a lot fairer and funner to play into. Although Incurser spam is pretty crazy now because they still have like ignore armor saves as well as obscurity, which is really, really good. But I think Phobos are in a nice spot. They're very well balanced, still challenging to play against, but very, very good. Then we have our second Eldari team with Void Dancer Troop. So Void Dancer Troop only climb for 1 inch no matter what, but they drop the full normal distance. The fact is, Murderous Entrance works on a normal, and then you can push through another normal unless you've only got crits left. They feel kind of too good. I think my biggest concern with them is the Shadow Seer, because it's now 5 dice, but every dice you match, you roll 5 dice, your opponent rolls 5 dice, you take D3 damage up to a maximum of 8. And the thing is, what I don't get, the 6 attacks doing 1 mortal wound for every dice that match was fine, and we weren't having any issues. But you're going to find that quite obnoxious playing against that, because they will literally like just shoot people in close combat because all you're checking about is valid targets. And, all your players, once per turning point, one of them can do a firefight ploy for free for that game. And then, but it means you can just charge in, reliably do Murderous Entrance and quickly kill 8 wound operatives, or 9 if you only have a crit and a hit. But Void Dancer Troop are very good. They're more simplistic, but they've still got all this crazy mobility, really good on Beta Decima, not so good on Gallowdark, and actually quite good on Vocus. And I think they're going to catch a lot of people off guard. The elite matchup still isn't great for them, but they have a Piercing 1 and Piercing 2 weapon. Although you do have to accept if you get in your melter into melter range, they're probably a dead operative. But otherwise, Void Dancer Troop are so good. The only thing holding them back is being so expensive and difficult to paint. And then my last kill team for A tier are Wormblade. I know some people have rated them quite lowly, but this team can now forward deploy up to 4 operatives, and they don't have to come down until the end of turning point 2. You have more ways to stall out your opponent at 12 activations, and you have support for other ranged weaponry. But I really like the Kellamorph and the Locust, although the Sanctus Sniper is pretty good as well. It's still a very tricksy kill team, and you have to remember it's got oldish wording, so you have to remember your ploys have effect and then a different effect on other stuff. But I think Wormblade are really, really great, especially with Gather Surveillance. The Kellamorph should, if it gets within 6 range of Astartes, will likely die. And then your Locust is really good in close combat, although you may be running the Sanctus Sniper a lot more. But otherwise, that's A tier. Now we get onto the S tier. Now there's 5 teams in S tier, and I was like, that's too many. I should probably do maybe make the S tier only 2 or 3 kill teams and push A, B, C, D down and have an E tier. My justification for 5 S tier teams is the game balance is horrible at the moment because most of the teams are actually really well balanced. I think the biggest problematic teams are all the S tier teams and the D tier teams and some of the A tier teams, but I'll get into that. So starting off with Angels of Death. Angels of Death are one of the best kill teams in the game right now. They are really reliable at ensuring they get at least 1 save every time you shoot at them, as well as reliably forcing through hits with Purity Seals when they shoot. the fact that they can all take Stalker bolt rifles. Stalker bolt rifles have kind of been buffed too much in terms of their mobile option is just a normal bolt gun. But if they want to be serious, they can go heavy dash and have lethal 5-up and piercing 1 crits, free 5. So you're actually seeing mass bolt Stalker rifles is terrifying. The Eliminator is crazy because it's absolutely broken on Beta Decima and Gallowdark. Because you have to remember in Gallowdark is now large open rooms. So when you've got an operative that just goes, did you put a barricade there? Well, here's my Seek Light, I'm going to fire twice. Good luck staying on that point. Makes it very difficult to play on, and especially on Beta Decima. But even on Vulcus, if you can get the sniper up onto the top advantage, he can become a really untouchable menace. But the kill team's very flexible. I think the nice restraint is that they can only select chapter tactics for the tournament. I think a lot of other teams need that kind of restriction. But Angels of Death are just really reliable and quite flexible. Your sergeants give more than the captain, in my opinion. But it's nice having sergeants that flex around, like your ranged intercessor and then your melee intercessor are very good leaders, and your captain is okay, maybe only taken into dedicated melee teams. But especially with the launch of the starter set, they're going to be a lot more popular and very, very good. They're just really consistent in, like, what made them so good when they first launched was not only that they were 14 wounds, it was the fact they were just reliably ensuring hits. And you have to remember with Angels of Death, they have purity seals to discard a miss to turn another miss into a hit. And they're going to be usually having their assault or whatever doctrines like Devastator or Tactical Op getting even more rerolls. And like that kind of reliability is insane. It just makes sure they can even like guarantee to have 1-for-1 trades. So like Space Marine can move, reposition, shoot one operative, kill them, and shoot another. Very, very efficient. And the fact that if they have an operative on engage for 0 CP, they can do 2 different unique actions when they counteract or spend a CP while they're concealed. And like the craziest thing, you can have the Eliminator shoot. And then if you wanted to spend a CP to give it obscurity and then shoot again when it counteracts. So lots of flexibilities there. Then we have Inquisitor agents. You know how I feel about Inquisitor agents. I think what people don't understand, it's not like... So I think they're just as broken as elites. And the reason I'm upset with Inquisitor agents is because Games Workshop reversed all their nerfs, which got them nerfed in the first place. So if you want to play Inquisitor agents, I think the main ancillary supports you're looking at the moment are usually Kazakin to run a plasma gun, a melter gun, or a recon trooper, the melter mine and the comms for just adding onto your multi-melter servitor and your plasma pistolier for all the piercing 1 and 2 weapons and just shooting people off the board. You've been buffed quite heavily, so your delay ploy is now still once per turning point instead of once per game, but the more you use it, the more CP it got. You've still got absolute authority. The biggest thing is having the Kazakin Recon Trooper designed to work better in Inquisitor agents because you get access to a 5th command strategy ploy for free, and it allows all your friendly operatives to dash, including your melee operatives, and obviously go an Eviscerator hits on freeze. And you can select any archetype, so you can do whatever you want. And like there's some things Games Workshop need to clarify, like technically if you put the skull and the leader with the -1 to hit, it technically stacks, so your opponent would be -2 to hit with a 2-inch bubble. You know, it's just really, really weird. They're very, very good. I think main things what we need to see them tone down is, personally, I would probably limit them to 1 plasma weapon and 1 melter weapon, or just 1 melter or plasma weapon like before, and limiting them to 2 ancillary supports. Because, you know, Exaction Squad are quite good. The only weird thing is if you take Exaction Squad, their Ruthless Efficiency gets replaced with the Inquisitor Agents keyword, which means your Inquisitor Agents can shoot into control range. Because like when Nova did their event for this year with no rosters, they limited Inquisitor Agents to 2 ancillary support choices, which I think is fair considering they're such a large kill team. But they're really, really good, and they take all the bad factions down in C tier and make them playable because they just make this weird, crazy fusion. So like Inquisitor Agents are the best non-elite team in the game, and they will beat every other team. I think they only really lose to Legionaries and Warp Coven, and even then it's super close. Like this is a crazily overtuned team on par with the elites. Then we've got Legionaries. They are crazy. Like my gosh, they're really flexible and oddly quite command point intensive. I think The greatest thing is how you can mix around marks. You get Severe on your melee if you're Khorne, shooting if you're Tzeentch. Slanesh is really useful, with Nurgle only being the weak link except for granting piercing -1. And I think that's the biggest issue. Like, the other nice thing is, like, your leader kind of does too much healing. If you take the Chosen, your Anointed, for some reason, when it unleashed the demon, can now shoot and use unique actions, which doesn't feel intentional as well. And then, like, your warriors are kind of too crazy being able to flick between marks. They're a very flexible kill team, and oddly, their Chaos Mark equipment is quite limited because you can only use it on... It's like a Purity Seal, but you take damage and you can only use it on the marks you select. They're very good at being able to give one operative a turning point to up armor save, and they're just super flexible and fun. I think they're just really interesting now. Everyone's 14 wounds, and they're really swappable, which is nice. I know, like, a lot of Angels of Death players are upset they're locked into chapter tactics, whereas Chaos is not, but it reflects how Chaos is like a chaotic team in general. You know, they're not really bound by any rules, although for Legionaries, like, the main changes I would make, so for their piercing 1, like they're negating piercing by -1, there's 3 different options I think Games Workshop should do. The first one, it doesn't turn off piercing if it downgrades your piercing to 0. So piercing 1, I think, should go to piercing crits 1. So if someone hits you with a piercing 1 weapon, if they still roll a crit, they trigger piercing, and you know, you could do that. Or what I'd actually prefer is you would change it if they had Mark of Nurgle and they used Implacable. They can retain a normal save as a crit save, and they can ignore all negative APL modifiers, because in that way you kind of, instead of having downgrading piercing, you now become immune to APL modifiers, and you get a little bit better. Instead of ignoring piercing, you can guarantee a crit save to kind of reflect what they did before. I would make the Icon, who is amazing, usually just once per game to get that +1 command point. I think that's fair. That would be fine. And yeah, they're just a really good and flexible team. I would probably change the Anointed so it can't shoot or do unique actions, so it can like run around demonically throwing stuns, which is hilarious, or smokes. But Legionaries are great. Like, the Butcher's still like but you get a lot of, like, they have the best warriors in the game. Warriors should either, you can only turn their mark once per turning point or once per game, or every time they change their mark they take D3 damage, something like that, just because being able to mass flip your marks is too good. But otherwise, the main downside when you're actually playing Legionaries, if you get too much choice, they are quite oppressive, but you have to play them right. And if you actually take the wrong combination of marks and operatives, you can actually lose quite quickly, which is interesting considering how tough they are. But when played well, they are equally tied for like best kill team in the game. Very, very good. Then you got Nemesis Claw. They just get into S tier, and in my opinion, it's because they destroy all Imperial teams. So they really mess up Angels of Death, and they really mess up Phobos because they get so many benefits from it. The fact they're always on Obscuring means that you can't even shoot them, because the other thing is, if they're standing on a vantage point with their gunner, because their gunner will be like within an inch of like light cover and technically heavy, they would be obscured, so they can be in the open and just shoot you. But they still have the really powerful like Vox Scream. They have their really powerful Ventriloquy. Their leader's more of an end game piece instead of this oppressive push-up piece. But Nemesis Claw are so good. Everyone tied in combat with them is not going to fall back because it chain snares. They have ways to mess up enemy APL from gaining APL. Very, very tricksy team and powerful. The only downside is they're locked into Seek and Destroy and Infiltration, which aren't the best archetypes, which is why they only barely make S tier for me. Like, that's their biggest weakness. Otherwise, they had some minor nerfs, but they're still like one of the best kill teams in the game. They struggle a little bit more into the Heretic teams, but they're so good. And I really love how they mess up hordes now, especially with the, you know, the Fearmonger. So good. Such a great kill team. Then finally we have Warp Coven. They're S tier. Like, they have the same problem that Legionaries have, where they can just downgrade piercing, which I think never should have really existed. But the great thing is you take 3 sorcerers, and then you either take 2 gunners and 2 Zangors, or 1 gunner and 4 Zangors. Zangors have been buffed. They're a lot better. Your kill team overall is really, really good. Changing the fact you can pick boons every game is crazy. You can do really powerful list tailoring, and they have effectively long range Seek, which messes up a lot of people, especially as Saturate. They're still a very tricksy kill team, but they're a lot easier to play than they were last edition. Rubric's going up to 5-inch move. Well, going to 5-inch move up with a flat 2-up save is kind of ridiculous, and double warp flamers are really, really good. There's still going to be a lot of experimentation when it comes to Warp Coven, but at the moment they're definitely one of the best kill teams in the game. Like, their biggest difficulty is Legionary and Inquisitorial agents, but otherwise they're great. Their weakness is a bit like melee, but they still have Zangors and like 2 Psychers with Kopeshes. 5 attacks hit on freeze, 4/6, lethal 5-up. You know, being able to switch your boons is very powerful. I think the only thing I would do to tone down Warp Coven is to mirror what their Piercing ploy should do, as I said, for Nurgle. So either if they downgrade Piercing 1, it becomes Piercing Crit 1, or you can retain a normal save as a crit save, and you're immune to APL modifiers to kind of mirror what Legionary does, because then it's still tougher, and, you know, a high AP piercing weapon will still hurt you, but you're more likely to save if they don't roll well, which I think is fair. And then, as I said, locking Psychers into boons for the tournament, just because the fact they can flex around makes the boons kind of way too good, but that might be intentional. But otherwise, that's the tier list. You know, you've got 3 in the D tier, 5 in the S tier. If you were asking for what my problematic teams are, it's everyone in the S tier, as well as Void Dancer Troop and probably Novitiates. Like, for Novitiates on Felgor, as I said, you make Frenzy only trigger from engaged operatives, like ready operatives. Novitiates, they just need their damage negation tweaked, so it only works once per turning point for each operative, and just clarify some of their rulings. Void Dancer Troop, just make the Shadow Seer's, you know, psychic shooting power, just go back how it used to be. And then, as I said, Angels of Death is difficult. I think you actually need a Stalker Bolt Rifle cap because of how powerful they are, and especially with the Eliminator, it can break Vulcus, because once it gets to the top vantage point, it just deletes everyone. And it's crazy on Gallowdark and Beta Decima. Yeah, I'm not sure how you really tone down Angels of Death, but they would. I think the best thing is probably limiting them to 2 Stalker Rifles per kill team, which won't happen, and then maybe tweaking what else they can do. Inquisitor Agents, you know, as I said, restrict the number of Melter and Plasma weapons they can take, and limit them to 2 ancillary supports. Like, especially, I think if they the Legionary and Warp Coven lose their piercing effects, then I would limit them to just 1 Plasma or Melter per kill team, because then that would be fine, because at the moment they kind of shoot and fight everyone off the board. Oh, and make their quest keep it on 4s. Legionaries, they actually have quite a lot of list of changes. For sense sake, I would make the Anointed, when it transforms, can't use ranged weapons or unique actions. I would also, as I said, for their Piercing ploy, basically either if they downgrade Piercing 1, it doesn't go to 0, it goes to Piercing crits, or you make them they can retain a normal save as a crit save and ignore APL modifiers if they're Nurgle, and you make the icon for the free command point once per game. And then you make Warriors, if you think Warriors are a problem, they can either change their mark once per game, once per turning point, or take D3 damage when they do so. Nemesis Claw, I think there's not much you can do. It's they're just in the S tier. You might be able just to, like, I don't know, maybe make some of their ploys cost a bit more, but otherwise they're kind of in a sweet spot. And then Warp Coven, as I said, reduce how their piercing ploy works as for Legionary, make boons, like per tournament, you pick your boons for the tournament, and then I think they're fine. The other thing with elites, which I'll touch on later in another video, it's not just that elites are strong, the game is kind of designed around elites. The fact there's only 3 objectives, counteracting is so powerful, the only way I'd really change that is 5 objectives, which isn't likely going to happen, and counteracting is really, really powerful. But also people are playing the game the wrong way. That's why, like, if you're playing the game currently, as you are in Kill Team 2.0, you'll notice that, like, if you look at, that's why I've put stuff like Farstalker, Kimband, teams that are quite weaker in the B tier, or even a bit higher in A tier, like with Commandos, because they're not great at killing, but they're really good at playing the crit op and the tac op. So you have all that flexibility. There's more different ways to score, and the game, if you're playing it just as a rushdown game, as you were kind of last edition, obviously elites are going to do well at that, because you're coming to them, you're going to fight, and then they're obviously going to get close to max their attack op. But if you're playing the game correctly, as it is implying now, where you play more defensively, maybe not engaged until turning point 3 or 4, you actually see why they've buffed elites in that way, because they kind of struggle if they don't get the tempo as much, but it's like going to take a lot of adaptation. And I think like the really interesting ones like novitiates are really good as a scoring team, as well as commandos. Jaegers are quite good as a scoring team because they just don't die in terms of like passive scoring. Farstalkers are the best because of poach, really good there. And I think Scout Squad have the same tempo as well. But overall, it looks really, really good. And yeah, you know, this has kind of turned into a long overview. I'm generally happy with balance as a whole. The only thing I would, as I said, you know, buff the D tier teams, make striking like all aspect warriors +1 wounds, so they're 9 wounds, 10 wounds for an exarch. You give scorpions a free up save and 5 attacks. You give howling banshees a -2 to their climb, or like they have the harlequin rule when they climb, something like that. Pathfinders, you just like targeting optics and the high intensity marklights twice per turning point, and I think that team's in a good spot. Otherwise, the balance is fairly fine. It's like, for the most part, teams are really well rounded. It's just kind of crazy we have this really powerful S tier with a few A tier teams almost in there, and then just D tier teams who are kind of like you know, Chaos Cult. Either I've removed the torment cap or make torments better, like 16 wounds. You know, it's just interesting, and I think this will change. In general, the tiers are quite close compared to last edition, even though the S tier is quite far ahead compared to like B, C, and D. They're quite close to the A tiers. Like Blooded still have a good time into most elites, but I think Blooded would really struggle into Inquisitorial agents, whereas Brood Brothers do really well into a lot of the meta, but now worry about elite teams. And Felgor, oddly, like Inquisitor agents will shoot everyone off the board and probably most elite players, but they do struggle into Felgor, and you have this weird kind of balance we have. Like, it's just, I think we're so early in the edition. That's why I think like a lot of people are going to get confused by novitiates, why Void Dancer Troop are so high up there, and especially Wormblade. But I think the game is really interesting, and the more you play, the more you see these interesting avenues. But that's pretty much it for me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of my tier list. Do you agree or disagree? And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below. I'll have an article version of this, hopefully. I've got an affiliate link at Element Games, an affiliate link with a discount code at Crossfire Games, as well as a Patreon if you want to give me some more support, and I'll quickly shout out my patrons. So for my adepts of the crit, I have Zombie Businessman, Tom, Super Cow, Stephen, Sam, Professor, Nick, Mercenary Q, Mr. Meatwad, Lucas, John Thomas, Graham, Fangzu, Draken, Dave Meatswell, Darcy, Dada Goldens, Chris, and then for my veterans of the crit, I have Samja and Mark. So thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me to help support the channel. But yeah, I'm quite tired. I haven't had much sleep. I'm really happy. My poll won and people pick sleep. So I'm so happy sleep won, but I haven't had much sleep. I've been prepping for Warhammer World, and then I'm going to America, trying to get my kill teams painted because I'm painting a lot of models. But hopefully this tier list is fun. Hopefully it doesn't make people too angry. I think it's going to be quite expected. Like, there's still a lot of solid kill teams out there. And, you know, some teams may shuffle up and down. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Hunterclade shuffled down to D tier, although they would be way too good for D tier. You know, and then maybe Kazakin might go up a tier. You know, Wormblade might go down. It's interesting. I think I just can't wait to see how more people play and we see more events, because, you know, I'll be at Warhammer World this weekend, and then I've got New York Open the week after. It's really interesting to see how people approach this kind of wide way of how you approach how you want to win your games. But remember, no matter what the tiers say, you stay away from tier 15. And remember, as long as you can roll a crit, you'll always be able to win.